You won't believe what happened next to a kid whose dad preached peace to the world, but barely called home. Imagine growing up with a last name everyone knows, yet feeling like a ghost in your own family story. That's the world of Julian Lennon, a life lived in the bright glare of fame, but always slightly off to the side where the shadows fall longest. If you've ever wondered what it's like to be loved by millions because of your father while not feeling seen by him, this one's gonna hit you in the gut. Stick around, because this isn't just about music history, it's about family, forgiveness, and whether some wounds ever truly close. From the very beginning, Julian Lennon's life was shaped by choices he didn't make. He was 5 when John Lennon, yes, that John Lennon, walked out the door and into a new life with Yoko Ono. That decision didn't just split a marriage, it cracked a childhood. Picture being a little boy who's told his dad is a legend, a revolutionary, a voice for peace, while your own house goes quiet. Fame makes noise. Absence makes a silence you can feel in your bones. And that silence became the backdrop to Julian Lennon's earliest memories. What happens next is the part nobody likes to talk about. Cynthia Lennon, his mother, stepped into both parental roles without the safety net people assumed was there. The world thought rock star money, but reality looked like budgeting, selling heirlooms to pay for school uniforms and keeping a brave face when bills came due. You can almost see her rifling through drawers for something, anything, she could turn to groceries and tuition. That's the unglamorous truth behind the posters on the wall. School didn't offer much comfort. Kids can be cruel, and myths are heavy things to carry on tiny shoulders. Classmates saw the surname and pictured mansions and limos. They didn't see the lunchbox packed on a tight budget or the letters that never arrived. Julian Lennon wasn't just the son of someone famous. He was a walking target for envy and misinformation. And when the world decides you're privileged, your pain becomes invisible. Yet somewhere in that pressure, he forged resilience, not the Instagram kind, real survival mode resilience. The kind you don't brag about because you're too busy using it. And here's where the contradiction slices deepest. As the myth of John Lennon grew, poems, interviews, songs about peace, Julian Lennon was left counting the days between calls. Imagine hearing your father tell millions to give peace a chance, while you're giving him one more chance to show up. That's not a neat irony, that's a scar. Over time, Julian Lennon called out what others tiptoed around, the gap between the public prophet and the private partner, between the anthems and the phone bills. It wasn't bitterness for sport, it was honesty, earned the hard way. Teenage years didn't magically fix things. Contact with John Lennon came in trickles, an occasional call, a visit that felt awkward more than warm. Meanwhile, in New York, John Lennon had a new rhythm with Yoko Ono and later with Sean Ono Lennon. And publicly, the story was about a father stepping back from spotlights to raise a child. That's a lovely story. For Julian Lennon, it was a reminder of what he never had. Imagine watching someone become the dad you needed, just not to you. That contrast can feel like a punch you have to smile through. Now, there were moments, brief, golden, almost enough to rewrite the script. During the period when John Lennon and Yoko Ono were apart, Maypong encouraged father and son to spend real time together. And for a while, it worked. John Lennon gave Julian Lennon a Les Paul, a drum machine, but more importantly, he gave time. Laughter, shared music, that rare sense that maybe they were building something. You know those days when it feels like the universe finally throws you a rope? It felt like that, but then the rope slipped. John Lennon reconciled with Yoko Ono, and the quiet returned. The warmth didn't evaporate. Memory is too stubborn for that, but it did fade at the edges. Even so, there were signs, tiny green shoots in a winter field, that a real relationship might still grow. Once, John Lennon called Julian Lennon from New York, excited, alive, playing him a new track down the line, just like starting over. The title alone felt like a promise, didn't it? On the other end, Julian Lennon heard something rare in his father's voice. Lightness, hope, a maybe this time energy. Sometimes healing shows up in small doses like sun slipping under a door. And then the night came that changed everything forever. December 8th, 1980, Mark David Chapman asked John Lennon for an autograph outside the Dakota earlier that day. Hours later, he pulled a gun and fired. Shock travels differently when the person is not just famous, but yours. Thousands wept in the streets. Yoko Ono asked the public to honor his memory in quiet ways, but far from New York, another scene was unfolding. Julian Lennon, back from boarding school and sleeping in the attic of his mother's home in North Wales, woke to the chaos of a chimney collapsing into his room. It's the kind of detail you'd think a novelist invented, sudden ruin crashing into a place of rest, except it happened. Shortly after the phone calls, the whispers that hardened into facts, the world lost a legend. Julian Lennon lost a father he was just starting to find. It's hard to explain how moments like that freeze a family's timeline. Those last conversations, hearing John Lennon excited about music again, about life, stuck in Julian Lennon's memory like pins on a map of what might have been. In another version of the story, they talk more. They make plans. They step past the awkwardness into something ordinary and precious, a routine. But history didn't allow it. The songs were what remained, and the tough questions. Next came the part most of us only ever see from the outside, the aftermath, wills, estates, lawyers. When John Lennon's will was read, everything, catalogs, rights, assets, moved under the control of Yoko Ono. For Julian Lennon, there was a small trust, but nothing close to what people assumed. That's the thing about myths. They're terrible accountants. On paper, this looks like money talk. In reality, it's about acknowledgement, about place. If your father speaks to the world but leaves your name off the document that defines his legacy, where does that leave you? So Julian Lennon did something that took courage most people never see. He fought, not for a payday, but for fairness and for pieces of his father that couldn't be streamed. A letter, a guitar, a photograph, a note scrawled at 2 a.m. in a studio kitchen. And because nothing in this saga is simple, that fight dragged on for years. Public opinion, with its short attention span, labeled him entitled or resentful. The truth, he wanted a seat at the table where his story had always belonged. In time, after long negotiations, a settlement was reached that offered financial stability and access to some of those personal artifacts. Money solves invoices. It doesn't always soothe old pain, but it did close at least one chapter. The most complicated relationship in this story has always been with Yoko Ono. For Julian Lennon, she wasn't a tabloid character. She was the person his father chose, the person who seemed to stand between him and everything left behind. For years, the coldness between them could be felt even in photographs, polite expressions, careful distances, the kind of choreography you learn when history is watching. He spoke openly about the resentment, and who can blame him? Power and grief make strange bedfellows, yet time is relentless, and it nudges us toward choices we never thought we'd make. One night, in 2010, offered a flicker of something softer. At the opening of Julian Lennon's photography show, Timeless, an unlikely group gathered in the same room: Cynthia Lennon, May Pang, Yoko Ono, and Sean Ono Lennon. No fireworks, no public drama. Just a room full of people whose lives are permanently knotted together. The evening passed with smiles, a few quick hugs, measured conversation. Maybe peace isn't always a headline. Sometimes it's simply the absence of a fight. What shifted things for Julian Lennon wasn't a grand apology or a legal victory. It was love for his brother. He realized that any shot he took at Yoko Ono would ricochet into Sean Ono Lennon, someone he genuinely cared about. That realization did what court orders couldn't. It softened the edges of long-standing anger. This isn't the kind of forgiveness that gets you a movie ending. It's fragile, conditional, practical. It says, we don't have to be close, but we don't have to keep bleeding either. In nans de bonds, some scars are best left undisturbed. And then there's the bond that might surprise you, the one between Julian Lennon and Sean Ono Lennon. Two brothers raised on opposite sides of a very public story. One grew up with the echo of a father's absence. The other grew up with his father's voice in the next room, until that night when the voice was taken. Differences like that could split a family for good. Instead, they learned to be gentle with each other. Julian Lennon has said they've never had a fight. Think about how rare that is in any family, let alone one watched by millions. Their connection didn't come from shared childhood memories. They had almost none. It came later, from tours and backstage conversations, from dinners after shows, from discovering that both of them knew what it felt like to be treated as a symbol instead of a person. In 2006, Julian Lennon watched Sean Ono Lennon perform in Paris, then spent time together during a 2007 tour. Those weren't splashy events, they were bricks in a bridge, and year by year, step by step, the space between them narrowed. Then came a quieter kind of healing. In 2021, the world watched never-before-seen studio footage in a certain documentary about a certain band, and the two brothers sat side by side. On screen, John Lennon wasn't a monument. He was a young man, sarcastic, brilliant, messy, alive, trying to make the art work. For Julian Lennon, seeing his father in that light again, without the fog of personal disappointment, was like opening a window in a stuffy room. He spoke afterward about feeling love for his dad return in a way he hadn't expected. That's the power of context. Sometimes it doesn't rewrite the past, but it reframes it just enough to let light in. Today, both brothers carry parts of the legacy forward in their own ways. Julian Lennon creates music, photography, stories that don't ask permission from the past. Sean Ono Lennon helps steer pieces of their father's catalog and creative projects, making decisions with the weight of history on the desk. They move differently, but their steps overlap. You don't escape a name like Lennon. You learn how to wear it without letting it wear you. Let's pause here and ask the question that hums underneath every part of this story. Does peace actually arrive, or do we just grow strong enough to carry the load? For Julian Lennon, peace doesn't look like a press conference or a hug that fixes everything. It looks like choosing not to reopen old battles. It looks like protecting his bond with Sean Ono Lennon more than he protects his resentments. It looks like telling the truth about hurt without letting it swallow him. Some days, that's as close to peace as any of us get it. If you're still with me, think about this. We're trained to treat icons like answers, but they're just humans with microphones. John Lennon changed culture. He also broke hearts inside his own house. Both things can be true at once. Julian Lennon's life is the proof. He's walked through rooms where his father's face is a mural on the wall, and also through kitchens where the only thing that mattered was whether there'd be enough at the end of the month. That kind of duality leaves a mark. It can make you cynical, or if you let it, it can make you honest. Honesty is actually the through line here. Julian Lennon has never sold a sanitized version of his childhood. He didn't varnish the loneliness. He didn't pretend the legal fights were just spirited debates. He told it as he lived it. Confusing, painful, occasionally beautiful, sometimes embarrassingly human. And strangely, that honesty reclaims something his childhood took away. Control of the narrative. When you say what happened, the past can't be used against you anymore. Is there still anger? Of course there is. You don't switch off decades of absence and contradiction like a lamp. But anger is no longer the only voice at the table. There's also gratitude for the moments of warmth he did get, for the guitar in his hands, for the rare phone call where John Lennon sounded eager to start over. There's tenderness towards Cynthia Lennon, who quietly did the work when the spotlight moved on. There's real affection for Sean Ono Lennon, who understands the pressure even when he experienced a different version of their father. And yes, there's a wary, negotiated calm with Yoko Ono. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to pass your pain down the family line. If you've ever dealt with a parent who wasn't who you needed them to be, you know the math here. You tally the losses. You hold on to the few wins like rare coins. You build a life anyway. That's what Julian Lennon did. He didn't erase his past. He used it. The photography, the songs, the projects, they're not revenge. They're replies. They say, Avu, I'm still here. I made something that didn't exist before. Now I found beauty in the broken places. That's the kind of victory that doesn't need headlines and the shadows. They haven't vanished. They probably never will, but look closely. They've moved. They no longer swallow the frame. They outline it. They give shape to the light. A boy who once felt forgotten learned how to tell his story so clearly that forgetting him isn't an option anymore. That's not just survival. That's authorship. So, has Julian Lennon truly found peace with his family's complicated history, or do the old resentments still whisper at 3 a.m.? Maybe the answer is both. Peace isn't a trophy. It's a practice. It's a choice you make on days when memory is loud and on days when it's mercifully quiet. It's deciding to love your brother more than you love the fight. It's accepting that the father who wrote songs for the world didn't write many letters to you, and finding a way to sing anyway. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever tried to make sense of a parent's contradictions or carried a last name that felt heavier than it looked, drop your thoughts below. Do you think forgiveness is a destination or a daily decision? What part of Julian Lennon's journey resonates most with you? The resilience, the honesty, the relationship with Sean Ono Lennon, the fragile truce with Yoko Ono? I want to hear your take. And hey, if you're into deep dives that go beyond the headlines and into the human heart of big stories, you know what to do. Tap that like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for hanging out and giving this the time it deserves. Until next time, take care of your stories, and they'll take care of you.